Okay, this is the Carry the Light Jewish Light podcast. This new podcast will seek to take a hard line on defining Judean values, shedding light on the modern diaspora and war on Jews, separating real Judaism from what has been co-opted, defining and advising on where Jewish defense and our teaching meets with the real contemporary world, and of course your lifestyle. And of course we're also going to be discussing Jewish excellence, our impact on history, and the relationship between the USA and Israel, and Americanism and Judaism. I'll be trying to interview a new voice for each episode and broaching a new question, such as our topic of discussion today. What is Tikkun Olam? What is Tikkun HaNefesh? And is Judaism singularly about Tikkun Olam, or is there more to it? So we'll be going over much more, but today I have Rabbi Stern, who's been an incredible teacher to me, and he's welcomed me and my fiance into him and his family's home many times for Shabbos. We've learned so much from the community, and so I had to have him on, of course. So Rabbi, so glad to have you.
Grant, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. I really feel like it's a privilege to be able to share thoughts and ideas about Judaism, and I really believe in all your causes and your drive to illuminate ideas that will change the world.
Hopefully we get there. I mean, we'll start with little things today. I should mention that I'm a chocolate lab person, Labrador Retriever person, and Rabbi has been smited by God apparently with an allergy to dogs. So I'll do my best to cut out the sneezing and wheezing, but it's not his fault, it's mine. So with that being said, So I felt like growing up in a reform environment and reform education system that if someone who was non-Jewish asked me to articulate what Judaism is in a sentence, I would say, oh, the benchmark is Tikkun Olam, which means, being a light unto this world, unto this earth, and that it's basically synonymous with charity and educating others and being a good person and being a mensch, which means being a good person, and that it's just like being a nice guy and such. And they would go, oh, that's really cool. Judaism is really cool. Or they would go, well, like, isn't that just being a nice person? And I'd be like, well, there's more to it. But that's basically the nuts and bolts of it. And then as I grow older, I learned that there's more to Judaism than just being, like, someone can be a non-Jewish person and be a mensch and do wonderful things, but that doesn't mean they are Jewish. Help me out here. Like, what is the difference? If someone was to ask you in a sentence, like, what is Judaism, would you say Tikkun Olam?
So that's really a complicated question.
They all are, of course.
And
and I encourage everyone on this podcast to
So I'd first have
take
to
a stance,
say, I'd first have to say that the Torah's instructions from a traditional Torah perspective is a light for every person walking around the earth. And even though there's a unique Jewish message, that unique Jewish message is for a universal perspective and universal goal. On the Rosh Hashanah davening, the prayers for Rosh Hashanah, the whole entire prayers where you're thinking about, it's about personal, you might be thinking about it's about personal repentance, return to God, character improvement, but the prayers on Rosh Hashanah focused on universal acceptance of the one God. So the idea of Tikkun Olam is certainly a uniquely Jewish idea that I think the Jewish people have shared with the whole world. This is an idea from already 3,500 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? But the idea of Tikkun Olam has been usurped as the single most important idea that Judaism has to offer by the general Jewish population around the world without being attached to its original root.
Which is, at least credit would be a little nice.
Well, credit, I would say the general Jewish population isn't even clear about how Tikkun Olam is rooted. Where is it rooted? So that's what I'd like to speak about right now.
Yeah, please.
So Tikkun Olam is really rooted in the Torah, Judaism.
Surprise.
Right. It's not, right, that's what else would a rabbi say? So, what is more the case in the world is that a person usurps an idea for their own agenda.
Sure, yeah.
So what's driving the idea of Tikkun Olam so much in the world, or fixing the world, thank God, it's a beautiful idea. But when you are trying to paint the world in your image, paint the world according to your values, your priorities. That's not the original understanding of what Tikkun Olam was. Tikkun Olam, by the way, is to bring God's light into this world.
To bring God's light.
Right, to fix the world in God's image. We're going to get to Tikkun and Nefesh. We're going to get there.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But we're unpacking.
Let's define our terms. Yeah, let's back it. And let's find out where the roots are.
Right, so Tikkun Olam is the foundation is the Jewish Torah. So the Torah, in its complete breadth, you would say, is God's opinion about the world. What are the priorities? What are the values? How do you weigh things out? When should you be doing something for yourself? When should you be doing something for somebody else? When I'm doing something for somebody else, is it a thing? Is it a person? Is it a place? How do I make sense of how I should spend my time, energy, and money?
Well, I think it's an important distinction that it's when you talk about carrying the light, and it's kind of like the name of this podcast, but that's God's light. That's not your light. That's not your political party's light. That's not the charity wing of your business's light. It's not just anybody. It's God's light as from the Torah.
Correct. The whole idea of our own creation and therefore the creation of the world is to, as it says in the Torah that we were made in the image of God. I would be able to simplify that by saying our role in life, our goal in life is to become more godlike from the Torah's definition. But they would be words like compassion and love and goodness. And the essence of the Torah is all of God's, so to speak, character traits. It would be to embody that within ourselves, in our own character, to develop our soul and connect that with character in this world, what we do, what we say. The canvas of life to express that is the world. The lackings in the world are for the sake to bring godly expression to one's individual self.
Kind of like an opportunity.
An opportunity. One half of the equation gets emphasized, and that is Tikkun Olam. And look, I don't want to get too sharp, but the fact that when Tikkun Olam is not attached to its root of the Torah, it becomes that people want to be involved in helping the world, but it's according to their own image.
Which is starkly different than God's image, of course.
Right. And their own priorities and whatever makes sense to them. So your focus could be more on, I do love Snickers and animals.
Snickers is the lab.
But, it could be the Torah emphasizes a little more on caring for human beings and individuals. Not that they don't care as much for animals, but how do you weigh the priorities of situations?
I was just in a prayer study a little bit ago, and somewhat weird. They were talking about the afterlife, and then someone goes, "What about the afterlife for my dog?" And the rabbi was like, and he was stumped for a little bit. He was like, "I'm gonna have to think about that and get back to you." I would have to say that's one of the first times I've seen a rabbi get stumped. But the distinction of that carrying the light or Tikkun Olam is about God's light, not your own or not somebody else's, and then that is rooted in the Torah, and that's not something that you can really define. If someone was asking me, "Well, what's Judaism? What's Tikkun Olam?" and they were to say, "Okay, well, what's the light? What are the core tenets of like that? What is that? I would say Judaism is a very difficult religion, and there's so much. It's infinite. You can't just read the Torah and then boom, you know it all. It's infinite, and so there's a lot of discipline, a lot of care, a lot of study that goes into figuring out what that light even means.
So another aspect I'd like to speak about how the idea of Tikkun Olam, nobody, including myself, is going to denigrate the idea of Tikkun Olam. It just has to be defined in its proper place and what it's for. Right? So we mentioned about creating the world in God's image, so to speak. Let the dictates of the Torah teach us what we should be doing in this world and how we should be doing it. What are the priorities? But the overemphasis of Tikkun Olam versus your own personal development, which we call Tikkun HaMidos, your own character traits. You can argue, which I will soon,
please,
that Tikkun HaMidos is not only as important, fixing yourself and your character is not only as important as Tikkun Olam, but one could see it as if it's more important. And yet, the world at large usurps the idea of Tikkun Olam, fixing the world, without mention, emphasis, or understanding what the whole goal is. It's like you start off with the idea that God does not need us in any which way, shape, or form to participate in fixing the world. He doesn't need us. So he gave us a job. But does the job serve us, or do we serve the job? Are we created for the sake of fixing the world?
I mean, I think a lot of people would think that
That would be
if
true.
humans had not been created and humans did not exist, that the world would be some sort of Garden of Eden in and of itself. So I feel like you're kind of getting to like, what's the meaning of like human life? And there are some nihilists, I think they call them, where they believe that, the world would be a better place if humans didn't exist. But if you take the opinion that humans have a job to do, and that part of that is being closer to God and being more God-like, well, then that speaks to a bigger game, I think, a bigger mission.
So I'll go in that direction for a moment. I have this riddle that I ask a lot of people. I said, there's two people that have $1 million, but only one of them is truly a millionaire. What's the answer to that riddle? Is that one person inherited the money, the other person earned the money.
Okay.
So if they both lose the $1 million tomorrow, there's only one of them earning it back, the one who earned it.
Gotcha. Makes
Right?
sense.
You inherited the $1 million. It doesn't make you, so to speak, a millionaire. You have $1 million in your pocket. But if you lose it, you're the same person.
Right.
A person who earned $1 million, he's a millionaire, even if he doesn't have the $1 million in his pocket, because he's crunched himself. The effort, the discipline, the accountability, the responsibility. It's who he is. So God created us with an opportunity to create ourselves. The greatest gift that God could give is himself, godliness. But he can't make us infinite. So how can God get us to intrinsically embody goodness and love? How can God give us the opportunity to bring godliness into our lives? He can't make us infinite. So he gives us an opportunity to inculcate, integrate, make ourselves into good, loving human beings. That is attached to why Judaism is attached to the mitzvahs. Actions and speech bring the development of character, which is attached to our soul. And our whole goal is to develop our soul in God's image, and that is really through developing our character.
So I'm taking a hard line and say that for much of non-Jewish thought, you do mitzvahs or you do good because you're buying your way into heaven. Versus Judaism, which doesn't so much have like a pearly gates theme, it has like you do good because you're getting closer to God, you're becoming more God-like here on this earth, on this plane. Half of my siblings converted to Judaism. They had to take very serious classes. They had to earn it a little more than I at the same age. I was just Jewish because I was born into it. I had sort of inherited the Jewish millions, the Jewish million. And I guess that bring it back to Tikkun Olam, I feel like that's where I absorbed this laziness, where I was like, or this intellectual religious laziness, that the religion is simply about, doing good and moving on. But it's more than that.
I would say the essence of our life is this opportunity that God gave us to develop ourselves in God's image. Tikkun Hamidos, it's called. Our character. The canvas of life is the world. The job of the Jewish people. So whereas the mission of an individual is to create themselves, become less angry, to become more loving, to have more patience. That's our job as an individual. But the place of of our efforts together as the Jewish people, that is where Tikkun Olam comes in. You'd say that's the canvas upon which I can fix myself. I can't become a lover and a giver by a world that's complete. And therefore, the world is incomplete. It gives me an opportunity to participate, but it's really for ourselves.
So let's talk about where the rubber meets the road. So if I'm on an airplane and, the bags come down and they always say you have to put the bag on yourself before assisting others, that's kind of like to your point of you have to fix yourself before you can be a light unto this world. If you're just doing mitzvot simply because you were told to do it and you think that it's going to, like karma can be kind of selfish. It's kind of like a selfish idea. I'm doing good because it's going to come back to me, as opposed to doing good because genuinely perhaps it's the right thing to do and you have a choice in that you don't have a choice because it's just the right thing to do. It's your mission, it's your purpose, it's your test, it's your opportunity. But then where the rubber meets the road, some people will say, okay, the light is this. For example, I'm going to take to evoke an opinion out of you, I'm going to give you an example. There are people that say that if you voted a certain way, you're not Jewish because you're going against Tikkun Olam if you voted a certain way or if you're affiliated with a certain political party. I don't want to get into the specific politics necessarily, but can you look at the sort of the principles? Can you look at the mitzvot and say that it's strictly the results, the actualization, the doing good in this world is strictly one thing and not another, or is a philosophy and not another?
It's not possible.
Not possible.
Because you would say no matter which side of the ledger that you're on politically, each party feels they take total responsibility for the world. They have just different ways to do it. There's no such thing as a person who's serious about life doesn't feel serious about wanting to improve the world. But there's an equal, if not more, emphasis on carrying the light means you have to embody the light. So to embody the light means I need to take responsibility for myself. I cannot be helpful to somebody unless I have what to give. This is going to sound a little self-aggrandizing, but people
aggrandize.
People say to me, sometimes a person said to me recently, Rabbi Stern, you have so much love to give others. Amazing. And I said, I was given the gift of love. And not only was I given the gift of love to give over, but I've worked on loving. So between what I received from my parents and my own work on love and giving, that's when I have what to give. And the quality of giving into the world is totally dependent upon what I received and what I sort of earned, I worked at. To give without the prior work of making yourself a light is irresponsible. So you don't draw a circle around Tikkun Olam is the Holy Grail. The holiest grail is drawing a circle around you developing yourself into the light. That precedes the giving. Just like before you get married. And I was in yeshiva, and after every year in yeshiva, I was like, I want to get married. And the rabbis were like, sit down. And then
whoa.
Right. And one rabbi, it's year after year. It took 5 years in yeshiva. So 5 years, the rabbi would say, prepare to express. The more you prepare yourself, the more you'll be able to express yourself. The more you are, the more you've become, the more you have to give. That was true.
So how do you teach that? How did you work on it yourself, and then how do you instill that into others? How do you give them that gift?
So it's much easier. I just want to say it's much easier to care about the world and do for the world than it is to do for yourself. And most people do the easy thing. It's much easier to live through your children and think that if they're involved in great acts, that you're great.
Well, yeah, sure. There are a lot of people out there that maybe don't do they may not study the Torah. They don't get personally involved with the synagogue, but I feel like a lot of Jews, it's very important to them that their kids go to Jewish day school, that their kids go to Sunday school, that their kids go to Jewish summer camp. I have to attend the high holidays because my kids have to attend the high holidays. But if you were to remove the kids out of it, they themselves are not getting directly involved.
It happens to be, I was just studying Parshas Noah and the flood, that whole generation. So the Torah portion, and that Torah portion starts, these are the generations of Noah, and then you expect, or these are the offspring of Noah, you expect them to list Noah's children.
Because it does that a lot.
Oh, it's interesting. So it doesn't. It says, these are the generations of Noah, and it says Noah was a righteous person who was complete in his generations. So the obvious question is that it just said these are the generations of Noach, or the offspring of Noach. You expect him to list the kids, but it lists his personal character development, his personal character traits. And it teaches us that the most important offspring a person could have is themselves, who they are. Who they are is the reservoir of how they impact others.
So can you be a very complete person and do bad things? Can you have the gift of love? Can you have completed yourself? Can you be extremely close to God and not do good things?
Well, if we're going to really draw definitive conclusions about what it means, what it means to be, look, I am a traditional rabbi, so I come from a traditional perspective. If you don't have an objective guide to teach you what is love, what is good, what is giving, what is compassion, and what it's not, then you're defining it yourself, and it's in your own image. I would say, and I would say the Torah is that objective document. But if you don't have a relationship within that Torah, you would want to get as objective as possible, if you could, as much as you could. So I would say, outside of the most important value would be to study Torah for a Jewish community. There's no doubt about it. But let's say you're not part of that learning community for whatever reason, or let's say you're not Jewish, or you don't have an interest in the Torah. I would say the only way to try to get out of your own subjectivity is to have lots of critical discussions that are not so personal, because you need to be committed to, I want to understand truth. I want to understand objectively what I should be doing. I mean, it's not very often that people are thinking like, this is really what I want to do, and they have mentors, and they have family members, and they have friends to go speak it out.
Right.
Like
Now what you said kind of sounds intuitive, but it's really not. My fiance is a speech language pathologist, and when we go on the various Shabbases, and not to be purely anecdotal, but one of the things that we're so fascinated by is that Jewish kids are light years ahead of the typical American milestones. And I'm not talking about they have to learn how to speak, they have to gain the courage to start speaking. Some kids are born with certain things that we don't know what they come from. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about learning how to express yourself and articulate certain things. When I feel like America has evolved past corporal punishment now, because we understand that it's better to reason with your kid and speak to them in a way that resonates, that motivates them to do the right thing as opposed to the wrong thing. Like, I need you to pick up your toys. Why? Because I'm going to smack you if you don't. And then all of a sudden the kid goes to college and there's no one there to smack them and they go haywire, versus, I'm going to pick up my toys because I don't want to live in a place where there's everything's run amok. There's an order here. And we found that some of these young kids, like, they'll turn to a very young kid and they'll be like, what did you learn about the Parsha, yada, yada, yada. And we're like, oh my God, that kid's way more philosophical than I am. It's incredible. Oh my God. And so to your point of going through on Shabbos, it's like very typical to discuss at least the Parsha, or discuss, ethical conundrums. And I find that the rest, I find that is a complete Judean value, that to not just educate on, be able to regurgitate, this happened on this date and this law was passed, but, just recently there was, the ethical conundrum was, okay, you're a police officer in Jerusalem and you see a non-kosher meat truck go to the back of a kosher meat place and they drop off the meat. Do you arrest that person right then and there, or do you set up a sting operation and follow the meat truck to see how many kosher restaurants they are giving non-kosher meat to, because the people are buying, the restaurateurs are purchasing what they think is kosher meat when it's really non-kosher. And it was this big discussion. I was on the side of just arrest the person right then and there, because then if you wait, you're culpable for for letting that one slide.
Right.
But the kids were there and they were participating in that discussion. That to me was absolutely incredible. And I forget, and then they bring out the book. These are what the rabbis say. This is what they say that.
I like to speak to what study is versus reading. Like
Right.
when you're reading a book, there's a lot of assumptions that you bring to the fore. So you're reading the book, you're turning the pages, your mind is filling in you're definitely reading, but your mind is filling in the assumptions about what's going on. Whereas when you're studying Torah, you are trying to seek what is the text saying, not to really what do I think it's saying. And there is a process of subjectivity to objectivity. Like, what is God trying to teach us? Or what are the rabbis trying to teach us through this sentence in the Torah? And I would say it's more, the commentaries of the rabbis are more illuminations, not interpretations. And interpretation would be, this is what I feel it means. And therefore, I am my own arbiter. Either God is God or you're God. And that's the striving for truth. What is the sentence saying? What is the Torah teaching us? How we should be living? That's what, when you're studying, is a difference as a community when you're studying, rather than just reading, so to speak.
Right. And within the rabbinic community, I don't know if it's frustrating for you. I find it to be kind of like a very healthy thing. There's no pope in Judaism. There's no, what does the biggest, baddest rabbi say? And and you're laughing.
I love that part. There's no pope.
There's no pope, and there's never has been. Even in Sunnis and Shiites, they're arguing over who's the bigger, badder,
or authoritative.
Who has the more exclusive access to their deities, interpretation of what is and what should be. Where within Judaism, there's no, it is because I say so. I'm the biggest, baddest, most person, exclusive access to God. Whether it be royalty with the king saying they have their power from God. When you have a Jewish argument, and it's a kind of a unique thing, you have to substantiate that. Okay, so in the example I gave with the meat truck, I can't just say, I think it is because I'm a bigger, badder, more learned person than you. I would have to substantiate it. And
right. A person could say to the other person, what makes you say that? On what basis do you say that? So it goes out from your own personal, this is my opinion, to, this is really what Judaism, the Torah, teaches us, so to speak. And then you say, what makes you say that? You got to be sourced, so to speak.
When I'm having a discussion with somebody, I recognize that they're a window into their thought process. They're a window into things that I haven't taken the time to study or see or experience before, as opposed to me trying to generally overtake them, to conquer them in a discussion, which is, I would say, very different from how I have discussions with everybody else. When you're talking with everybody else, you're more than likely trying to convince them as opposed to trying to learn.
I think it's one of the biggest changes in my last 30 years since I've been on Earth. And when I started my journey, is that it used to be discussion, and now there's really more general one-way diatribes. And I don't think you can come to a more objective place in your life without discussion. And I would say the most important thing is to create discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, even in terms of what you were saying about how we learn in our classrooms, there's something. One way is top down. Another way is to throw out certain things. Yes, you want to do a certain amount of top down, but where are we creating room for children, for other adults, help them develop their thought processes and support them and accept them while they're thinking about those kinds of things. Let them feel safe, get them to develop their minds. I feel like sometimes we're living in a society where people do not have the capability of thinking.
Yeah.
Certainly analytical thinking, discussion, back and forth. And in order to appear right, people will very much often give their opinions without having really thought through in a deeper way, without having discussed it with a lot of different people in their lives, and with their own thoughts and opinion that suits them, so to speak.
I have a very good non-Jewish friend who I work with closely, and he attended my bar mitzvah way back in the day. And it was his first, just like I attended their communions, they attended like our bar mitzvahs, and he was blown away because every bar mitzvah, they have a young person, a 13-year-old naturally, go up onto the mima and give a speech, and everybody sits there and listens. Where in a typical American classroom, kids give presentations and things, but you're basically always pandering to what you're saying, what you're supposed to say, and even when a bar mitzvah person's giving their speech, they're substantiating what they're saying. You could argue that they're saying what they're supposed to say, but I feel like in a Jewish learning environment, it is more round table. It's way more discussion based than sort of the American schoolhouse learning style of 16 to 30 kids in a classroom, teacher, expressing information on it. And now today with social media and everything, everyone my age is wondering why that seems antiquated. Having a person standing up in the front of why can't I just watch a YouTube video of that person telling me the same thing? Why can't I just go to school from home? Why do I need to go to these various different classrooms versus there is no, Skype kind of comes close. FaceTiming kind of comes close, but there truly is no substitute for a group of people sitting around in an intimate environment where they're all equals and they're just having a genuine discussion and learning from it. There is no substitute for that.
I agree. And that's what you see at the Shabbat table on a weekly basis.
That's the Shabbat table, yeah.
It just had a couple came in to see me a mother and their daughter came to see me last night. The daughter is growing more towards being a traditional Jewish person, observing the commandments. And the mother, that's not how they grew up, and the mother's not. But so I asked the daughter, what has attracted you to grow? So she said, I was at Temple, I should give it a plug where plug is due. I was at Temple University. I went to this Chabad rabbi for Shabbat, and I saw a thing of beauty. I saw the mother and the father treating each other with great respect. I saw a lot of respect there. I saw the kids respecting the parents. I saw that everybody was involved together with the meal, singing, sharing ideas. She said, I was blown away. So what did this mother say? She was so not defensive. It was so amazing. She didn't say, oh, you didn't see that at our house? She said.
Oh, true.
She said, I understand what you saw because we really did not have that at our house. I said, how was your house? She said, my husband and I, or two physicians, were so busy and we barely had time at the table all together. So one thing is spending time at the table all together. The other thing is, what are we all going to do with that time that brings us all together? And that's really what the Torah does and Shabbat does. It gives something in the middle for all of us to have a piece of at the same time and experience it together at the same time.
Shabbat, I have to say, I had a similar experience, and Shabbat is so powerful for all the reasons you just mentioned. For the American dream, right? The American dream, I would say, is that it's to raise a family, to raise your kids, to live a better life than you led. But in a hyper-materialistic society, it's really difficult. If you're two parents and you're making, each $100,000 a year, or you're making a very sizable, very good income, it gets, or let's say you do become a millionaire, you strike it rich, you hit that pot of gold or whatever, it's very difficult to set your kids up to even surpass that. And so they're, what if you had a 30-foot yacht, your kid's supposed to make it so that they can get a 40-foot yacht? I don't think that's so much the American dream, and I feel like Judaism ties right into that, where it's, in that family's case, they provided for their family, they provided a wonderful life and education for their family, but then, okay, where do you go from that? Are they supposed to become like better physicians, more accomplished physicians? Are they supposed to have written more articles in magazines? Or does Judaism provide like a sort of greater American dream in which that like you're providing the ability for your kids to become closer to God, to become more complete like Noah? where they can be sort of like a better light, a better person, and then therefore live a better life. Like they talk about like one person's rich, one person's wealthy. Like one person's rich in terms of like they've got a lot of monies. One person's like you said, like no, he's just more complete. And I feel like that's the beauty of. I feel like that's the true secret sauce of Judaism. It's more than just doing mitzvot for the sake of mitzvot.
Right. So I'd like to tie this all together with the upcoming holiday of Passover. Right, but we're going to tie it together right now. So in Passover, we have a Seder. A Seder means there's a set order of what we need to ritually do or discuss along the way. There's 15 different steps, and there's 15 different steps of freedom. That's exactly what Passover is all about. Right?
Steps of freedom.
15 steps of freedom. So after we make Kiddush, like we normally do that, sanctify the day over a glass of wine with a blessing. We normally do that for the holiday or for Shabbat. That's what we normally do. Right. And then we do this washing, this ritual washing that we normally do for a holiday or for Shabbat. But this time we don't say a blessing, and this time we don't eat right away. And the question is, why do the rabbis change the normal order of how we go about having a meal? They put this washing that we normally do, but without a blessing, we don't eat the meal right away, and it leaves everybody with like, we just washed our hands for the meal, but where's the food?
Where's the food?
And now, and now they're handing out these pamphlets. So the rabbis ask the question in the Talmud, what is going on here? And the answer in the Talmud is that we're setting the theme of the whole night. The whole night is to notice and be curious. To be curious and to notice things and to ask questions. The purpose that the rabbis put that washing in the Seder is so that children will ask questions like, where's the food? And that is sets up the whole evening. Right? The centerpiece of the story of Passover is the 4 questions. The goal of the Seder is to tell your children the story of going out of Egypt to arouse their curiosity and their engagement and discussion. This is the night. Oh, the mitzvah of the evening is to tell the story over to your children.
Right.
If you have a lot of adults over and you're just giving a lot of good stuff to adults philosophically and personal development and growth, but you don't address and engage the kids, you have failed your Passover Seder. It is the paradigm night, I think, I'm going to pull it now all together, of what I think you were speaking to in terms of what real education is. Being a light to carry the light, that should be the slogan. I need to be a light to carry the light.
I like that.
And before I carry the light, i.e. be involved in Tikkun Olam, in fixing the world, I need to be an engaged, educated person who's curious, who asks questions, who is in wonderment, who doesn't know everything, who needs to speak and learn from others, to be a wise person, learn from other people. That is the first most important priority of a community, and that should be the Jewish people's first priority, is study and creating true dialogue. And then as we develop ourselves, we will develop more informed opinions, more informed to be able to express ourselves in the proper way. Everybody who gets married, they'd love their husband to learn what it means to be a husband before he gets married.
Before I get married, I have like a whole list, and one of them for my fiance was you have to memorize Ashes Isle. You got to memorize. You got to have it down, which is
before you have children, know what it means, that responsibility. Know what the responsibility of being in this world is all about. Know what the responsibility of what God expects from us and what he wants us to bring forth to this world. And then spend your life expressing it. But don't stop learning, because that's the reservoir of expression.
So the next time someone asks me, what's Judaism in a sentence, I'm going to have that last part of this podcast pre-recorded.
Be a light.
I'll play it
To carry the light. I think we
like
came
that.
up with a good thing.
No, I think that's really cool.
That would have been better.
That is really, really cool. That would have been better. Oh, geez. That is really cool.
As defined by the Torah.
As defined by the Torah, you got to have the roots.
Right? You can't even, and Tikkun Olam, it goes without saying, Tikkun Olam is only dependent upon God's view of what should be in the world and how it should be, the priorities. It's not up to you.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Rabbi, thank you so much. This was a pleasure. This was awesome. I love that last part.
It was worth the whole
to
40 minutes or whatever.
And the allergies you're gonna have after you're leaving here from my Labrador.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Look forward to spending more time together, more study time together, and more Shabbos time together. God willing.
Good Shabbos. It's Friday. Good Shabbos to everyone listening. And please subscribe. I'm sure I'll have Rabbi Stern back on if you'd like. And this is the Carry the Light podcast. And thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom. And catch you next time.